So our first reading this morning is from Psalm 133, and this is the Laughing Bird version. What a great thing it is, Lord, when people can get along with one another and live together in unity and mutual respect. It is even more satisfying than holding the cup aloft and dancing in the rain of champagne on grand final day. It is even more desirable than sitting by an open fire sharing chocolates and fine wine with a loved one. It is even more beautiful than the monsoon rains turning the desert into a sea of wildflowers. For you, Lord, created us to be one people, committed to one another, honoring one another, sharing the land and its blessings forever. Our second reading this morning comes from Genesis chapter 19, verses 1 through 11, and this is from the New Revised Standard Version. The two angels came to Sodom for the evening, and Lot was sitting in the gateway of Sodom. When Lot saw them, he rose to meet them and bowed down with his face to the ground. He said, "Please, my lords, turn aside your servant's house and spend the night and wash your feet. Then you can rise early and go on your way." They said, "No, we will spend the night in the square." But he urged them strongly, so they turned aside to him and entered his house. And he made them a feast and baked unleavened bread, and they ate. But before they lay down, the men of the city, the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man, surrounded the house, and they called to Lot, "Where are the men who came to you tonight? Bring them out to us so that we may know them." Lot went out of the door to the men, shut the door after him, and said, "I beg you, my brothers, do not act so wickedly. Look, I have 2 daughters who have not known a man. Let me bring them out to you and do to them as you please. Only do nothing to these men, for they have come under the shelter of my roof." But they replied, "Stand back." And they said, "This fellow came here as an alien, and he would play the judge. Now we will deal worse with you than with them." Then they pressed hard against the man, Lot, and came near the door to break it down. But the men inside reached out their hands and brought Lot into the house with them and shut the door. They struck with blindness the men who were at the door of the house, both small and great, so that they were unable to find the door. May the Lord bless us in the reading of his word. And today, we have a very special guest speaker, and I would like to introduce to those who have not had the pleasure of meeting him, our own Joe Rogers. He's been a member of the First Christian Church, Chico, for about 15 years, and he has served as a steward, a deacon, a Sunday school teacher, adult Christian educator, education facilitator, an elder, and of course, one of our previous guest speakers. Joe currently works for Butte County Department of Behavioral Health as a behavioral health counselor. He holds a bachelor's degree in sociology with an emphasis on social justice. No surprise to any of you that know Joe already. We are excited to have him here again. And Joe, good morning and welcome as our morning guest speaker.
Y'all expecting way too much today. So yes, good morning. One of the things that I'm often told, and you all can't hear me, right? Because we're good? Now we can. Okay, there we go. One of the things I'm often told about sermons is they're supposed to ask questions and get us thinking about the different aspects of our faith. So before I begin today, I want to start by saying that I have nothing against the Bible. I firmly believe that the Bible is a wonderful collection of writings that have some amazing and inspiring stories, beautiful poetry, and many really good life lessons. That being said, many of us know that too often, far, far too often, Bible verses are used not to give hope or heal, but rather to wound and cause pain and suffering. I want to talk today about how we, as a society, continue to filter Scripture through our own sieves. I am not arguing that Scripture is not instructive. We need to remember that we live in a different era. Our lives and culture are very different from those contained within the Bible's pages. So let's be honest. There are several passages that are difficult to reconcile to our modern Christian sensibilities, and some that are downright off taste. In short, this morning I will be looking at scripture verses that, if they were taken literally, we would either be shocked, appalled, or maybe even laughing. Take today's scripture passage. I'm sorry, folks, right now, the pages are at that in-between moment for those who wear reading glasses, like it's far enough away I can't read it, but it's not close enough to read it, so there we are. Technical difficulties, first world problems. Take today's scripture passage that Lori read for us this morning. Now, I can spend the whole amount of my time this morning rehashing this passage. Whether the depravity of Sodom was punishment due to the men of Sodom wanting to break Lot's adherence to the laws of hospitality, whether it was due to their attempt at, you got all the little ones out, at rape, or whether it was due to their uninformed assumption that it was due to homosexuality. The latter one is hard to believe due to the passage noting that the men of Sodom, both young and old, all the people to the last man surrounded the house, but we're going to keep moving forward. So while Lot is attempting to keep the townsfolk away from the strangers, who, as we noted in the first verse, were angels set to test the town, he leaves the house to confront them. In an effort to fend them off, he actually offers his 2 virgin daughters to do with as they please. The closest thing I've been able to think of when writing this, what is our modern translation to this? Modern day trafficking of humans, mostly female, and I think we pretty much agree that this is a crime against humanity. But Lot was sitting there offering his daughters for depravity. I honestly struggled to find the words to describe this. Anyone out there have any daughters? Yes? Yes? Anyone out there willing to, you know what? No, just no. We're not doing that. Let's move on to the passage that follows the one that Lori read this morning. If you haven't read it, Lot and his 2 daughters, the ones that he was going to give to those men in Sodom to do with as they pleased, they had managed to escape. As you know the story, his wife turned back and was turned to a pillar of salt. But Lot and his 2 daughters take up residence in a cave for reasons. Because they were so distant from town, however, the daughters came to believe that they would never have husband or children. Now, through a form of logic totally unknown to me, they hatch a plan. Get the old man good and drunk, and then, hey. Yeah, all this due to their fear of never being accepted into a community. In our modern day, not only would this be sexual assault, but a particularly heinous one. Moving on, let's move on. Let's consider the issue of slavery. Our modern sensibilities consider the concept of owning another human being abhorrent. I am personally a fan of the early Exodus story, the path of freedom for the nation of Israel. Yet in Exodus 21, verses 20 through 21, we read a commandment that is taken up by that same nation just shortly after this journey of theirs. It reads, "When a slave owner strikes a male or female slave with a rod, and the slave dies immediately, the owner shall be punished. But if the slave survives for a day or 2, there is no punishment, for the slave is the owner's property." Does anyone think there is something a bit wrong with a people who had been enslaved for generations owning slaves? Working in behavioral health, I am gifted with what we call clinical judgment. And I'd have to make the call that this is a cycle of violence and abuse perpetuating itself. Unfortunately, with our scriptures, we move into the New Testament to Ephesians, where in chapter 6, verse 5 and 6, this letter reads, "Slaves, obey your earthly masters with fear and trembling, in singleness of heart, as you obey Christ, not only while being watched, and in order to please them, but as slaves of Christ, doing the will of God from the heart." Now, I don't know about you, but I haven't heard very many sermons of late about the virtues of slavery. In fact, psychologically, slavery is damaging not only to the oppressed, but the oppressors. Point in fact, if any credible pastor, priest, or rabbi were to deliver such a message, we'd know about it. This is the 21st century, where there are probably more cameras than there are people. It would be on the news. There would be protests, social outrage, general uproar for a few days at least. And of course, one of the fun ones in Scripture this is a story that even as a child I just thought was hilarious. In 2 Kings, we have a story regarding the prophet Elisha. In chapter 2, verses 19 through 25, Scripture reads, "He went up from there to Bethel, and while he was going on the way, some small boys came out of the city and jeered at him, saying, 'Go away, bald head, go away, bald head.' When he turned around and saw them, he cursed them in the name of the Lord. Then 2 she-bears came out of the woods and mauled 42 of the boys. From there he went on to Mount Carmel and then returned to Samaria." And that ends the chapter. So a celebrated prophet, student, if you will, of Elijah, is an accessory to maiming of 42 children. This is like a third grade name-calling session that got way, way out of hand. So, all right, we've covered sexual assault, we've covered slavery and mauling, so let's keep on moving. In Exodus chapter 22, verses 16 and 17, when a man seduces a virgin who is not engaged to be married and lies with her, he shall give the bride price for her and make her his wife. But if her father refuses to give if her father refuses to give her to him, he shall pay an equal amount to the bride price for virgins. Seems to me that the consequence of this action is either to pay a fine and marry the girl or pay a heftier fine. Seems like we are shown a woman's value in that day and age. But then again, Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 28 and 29 does state, "If a man meets a virgin who is not engaged and seizes her and lies with her, and they are caught in the act, the man who lay with her shall give 50 shekels of silver to the young woman's father, and she shall become his wife. Because he violated her, he shall not be permitted to divorce her as long as he lives." So force the victim of this assault to marry and live with the assaulter for life. Got it. Not done yet, and this is one that's becoming very much in our news cycles in this day and age. 1 Timothy chapter 2, verses 8 through 15. "I desire then that in every place the men should pray, lifting up holy hands without anger or argument. Also, that the women should dress themselves modestly and decently in suitable clothing, not with their hair braided or with gold, pearls, or expensive clothes, but with good works, as is proper for women who profess reverence for God. Let a woman learn in silence with full submission. I permit no woman to teach or to have authority over a man. She is to keep silent. For Adam was formed first, then Eve. And Adam was not deceived, but the woman was deceived and became a transgressor. Yet she will be saved through childbearing, provided they continue in faith and love and holiness with modesty. Well, this is a fun one to unpack, right, ladies? First, how do you judge modesty except against the social norm at the time? I do have to ask, how many of you ladies this morning do have your hairs braided or done up, maybe permed? Anybody okay? Anyone, any ladies wearing any gold or pearls this morning? Rings, necklaces, earrings? Okay. How about learning in silence? Don't ask questions, just do as you're told. Which, by the way, that is the full submission part. Don't question, just do as you're told. That usually works out, right? Okay. Then there's the one which is tearing apart one of the major Christian denominations here in the United States. See, women are not supposed to have authority over men, nor are women supposed to teach men. I sincerely hope that this is just in religious settings, because if it's also in colleges, universities, or the workplace, your menfolk are in deep trouble. I would guess that at least 2/3 of my faculty are female identified. It took me a minute, but I can confirm, I actually had to go back and look at my resume, that since I started Butte College in 2007, all the way up to my current job, I've only had one male supervisor. So the ladies had better been able to have taught me. I'd be dead bad at my job if I were still in my field at all. Oh, and ladies, apparently y'all to blame for the fall of man, the loss of innocence, expulsion from paradise, and just find salvation through baby and making, so no judgments. Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 2, those born of an illicit union shall not be admitted to the assembly of the Lord, even to the 10th generation. None of their descendants shall be admitted to the assembly of the Lord. So first, the sins of the parent are passed on to the child. No, correction, 10 generations will be turned away from the assembly. What about an adopted child? A stepchild? Then again, illicit may even be divorced. A kid's parents divorce, and so 10 generations are admitted. I don't know about you, but I'm not certain what my family was doing 10 generations ago. I'm not even certain what they were doing 4 generations ago. So, no doubt you have a few questions now in your mind about, Joe, why haven't you done any sort of linguistic analysis? Or why haven't you answered any major or even minor questions of theology? Because these are some of the questions that we should all be asking. These are also some of the answers we should all be party to. We believe that the Bible is our holy scriptures. No book but the Bible, we say. But we also know that by and large, churches of the Christian faith are on the decline in the U.S. today, partially because of the scriptures I've already covered today, partially for a whole host of others that I really didn't have time for. The Bible is a wonderful book. It provides us with so much inspiration and hope and courage and peace. But we also need to take a step back and realize that its texts come down to us through the ages with all the failings that come with time. Mistranslations, post-event writing. Much of the Bible was not like a court transcript that's being written at the same time that it was taking place. Errors in human judgments, errors in bibliography. The Bible brings us, Christians, to our history, or at least some of it, the how we got here, but not all of it. It was also written, however, in a day and age where all of us, if we had been searched by the town guards or whatnot, would probably have been taken to the gates of the city and stoned to death for sorcery. Y'all got one of these? There you go. It was written in a time before the before the Enlightenment, before industrialization, before we as a species begin to understand the world around us and in us. It's not that our scriptures are wrong, but we really need to to really, really take a step back and consider time, place, context, language, current laws, and our social norms. The world needs understanding and peace, not division and a who's for who against us mentality. The Bible needs to be taken as a whole and is beautiful just as much as for its strengths as for its flaws.